And if there's one moral that the United Methodist Church should have gotten from all this, is that coercion is wrong and it doesn't work. And they've refused to learn that lesson. So as they continue to tighten their grasp, more and more churches are getting out, as they should. So yeah, that's an easy segue into the next topic, which is the Dakotas Conference votes to close Embrace Church as a United Methodist congregation. We're going to read this article for a second, but actually I remember I wanted to just look at the way Chris Ritter characterized this in his mailing, because the setup to this is there was a disaffiliation provision, very open-ended, up until a few years ago, as paragraph 2548.2, where you could just transfer a church and its assets to another evangelical denomination. But whenever disaffiliation season approached and we decided we needed to split, paragraph 2553 was approved. They refused to enact it for non-American churches on a technicality. It was allowed in America. In different conferences, some put prohibitively high costs on getting out, but there was a window at the end of last year. Churches could no longer exit. But then paragraph 2549 was being used. You could close your church and then buy it back from the conference. Recent Judicial Council decision ruled that you can't do that. There is no disaffiliation provision from the United Methodist Church anymore. No conference can have a policy around just go through this process and we'll let you out. So the way that Ritter said it is the Dakotas Conference met on November 23rd in a special session to close one of the top 10 churches by attendance in United Methodism. So Embrace Church in Sioux Falls represents over 20% of the total worshiping attendance of the entire annual conference, and it was released to its leaders under paragraph 2549 in spite of a recent Judicial Council ruling. So in this article we're about to read, the author reports that conference chancellors carefully reviewed the Judicial Council. You know what? Let's just read the actual article. So we won't read the whole thing, but this is just one of those things, that you have to pay attention to, because each annual conference is going to do whatever they do. And they'll say, oh, we're bound by this. They're not really bound. There's not going to be any repercussions if they disobey the Judicial Council, because guess what? A culture of disobedience has already been firmly instantiated for decades. And this is what happens now, is each individual conference is just going to do what's right in its own eyes, and other conferences will gnash their teeth at them because they ruin it for everybody. What should happen now is, based on this and other annual conferences, local churches should be coming to their conferences and going, well, look what they did in the Dakotas. Why can't that happen here? What exactly are you afraid of? Why can't you let us have freedom? I hope that that's the impact that this has. So this was written by Rebecca G. Trefitz. I'm sure I said that wrong. The Dakotas Annual Conference has voted to close Embrace Church as a United Methodist congregation. Clergy and lay members gathered via Zoom for a special called session on Saturday, November 23rd. The resolution presented by the Dakotas appointive cabinet was amended by the body and affirmed by a vote of 162 to 22. Wasn't even close. The approved resolution read as follows. Whereas through mutual discernment and deliberation, it is recommended that Embrace United Methodist Church be dissolved as a United Methodist congregation. Therefore, be it resolved that the congregation be recognized with thanks to God for their partnership in ministry, and that Embrace UMC in the Southeastern District of the Dakotas Conference be officially discontinued under the provisions of the Book of Discipline, paragraph 2549. That's exactly the provision they weren't supposed to be able to use in this way, by the Dakotas Conference effective December 31st. Be it further resolved that the conference accept the agreement set forth in mediation and direct the trustees to complete the process and attend to the disposition of property. And with the help of pastoral leadership at Embrace and assistance of the Southeast District Superintendent and spiritual leaders, to tend and care for those that wish to remain United Methodist. Something else to note, they're using 2549 in a way that it's been ruled. I don't want to be too disingenuous. They are saying this isn't being used to allow disaffiliation. They really are they're not United Methodist doctrinally anymore. But the thing is, the other thing I note here is the very gracious tone here, acknowledging you done great ministry. This is an amicable thing. This is how it should have gone. This is how it should have been around the connection. Just a gracious, we can't walk together anymore. God bless you. It doesn't have to be acrimonious. This is the exception rather than the rule. The session came at the culmination of conversations and formal mediation that began between the Dakotas Conference leadership and Embrace Church in early 2023. In addition to the bishop and cabinet, conversations and discernment regarding Embrace's future included representatives from the Conference Council on Finance and Administration, the District Board of Church Locations, both conference chancellors, the assistant to the bishop for connection and communications. Oh my gosh, so boring. During the process, Pastor Adam Weber, lead pastor of Embrace, met with individuals and families from Embrace who had UMC connections or roots. Embrace has not had a practice of receiving persons into formal membership for over a decade. The intention of Weber's conversations was to gather input on Embrace's future relationship with the denomination. So this thing gets hairy because they don't have a formal membership role. They haven't been practicing membership for a decade. That's interesting. The norm is we practice membership, that we don't maintain it. So we just have these bloated roles. They went to this other extreme of just saying, we don't have any members. Through the process, it was determined that Embrace Church, though constituted as a United Methodist Church, no longer reflected the identity, polity, practices, or doctrinal standards and theological task of the United Methodist Connection. In presenting the resolution, the cabinet presented several factors that affirmed this determination, including the connectional nature of clergy appointments, understanding the practice of the sacraments, education and accountability required for credentialed pastors, connectional giving through apportionments for shared mission, the membership process, and commitment. So there were a number of ways in which the norms of the church did not reflect what was found in the United Methodist Book of Discipline. I think they didn't practice infant baptism. That's a pretty key one. But then the thing is, the trust clause was actually put in place in order to mandate doctrinal conformity, so that if a local church was rebelling against the theology of the denomination could step in, remove leadership, and then send new leadership that would bring them in conformity. So things have gotten this far, and the trust clause has not been used in that way. The trust clause is being used throughout the UMC to coerce churches into staying that don't want to stay, that already have huge theological divergence points from the denomination. But here, because this church is big, because it's rich, or most likely, as we're going to see in a second, because they have $9 million worth of debt, the conference is, oh, you have different theology. You now qualify for leaving graciously because you just believe different things. So there's the law of unintended consequences. One of the things that I would understand if United Methodist churches were wanting to get out and they realize 2549 can't be used in the straightforward way. Well, what if we have beliefs as a congregation that don't really match what's in the United Methodist Book of Discipline, whether it be the clergy practices as talked about here, sacramental practices and beliefs, women's ordination, who knows? But what if a congregation gets together and says, we don't believe what the United Methodist Church believes anymore. Let us go. Here's a precedent set for incentivizing churches leaving their Wesleyan heritage in order to get free with their stuff. I very much doubt that the denomination is going to look sympathetically upon this. It also could be something where local congregations start taking on debt so as to be unattractive to their annual conferences, although there is stuff in place that would preclude them from doing that. This is something, if you don't have a pressure release valve, then local churches are going to continue feeling around for weak spots in the armor so that they can find their way out. And the more time and energy that the United Methodist Church puts into fighting these things, the more distracted they're going to be from stemming the tide of their inevitable decline. Let's read a little bit more. Let's see. In presenting the resolution, the cabinet presented several factors that affirm, we already got that. While Embrace is still a viable congregation of Christian ministry, so paragraph 2549 says you can close it when they're not viable. So they are still viable. It was determined that it no longer serves the purpose for which it was organized as a UMC congregation. With the passage of the resolution, the district superintendent will work with Embrace leadership to establish if persons who originally joined through United Methodist membership vows wish to transfer to another UMC or withdraw their membership. Following the mutual discernment by the conference leadership, the conference trustees began the process of determining terms related to property. A formal mediation process was engaged. Quote, through the conversations and discernment, it was established that it is in the best interest of the conference, as it relates to a kingdom-minded witness and stewardship of resources, to sell the property that vests with the annual conference to the new Embrace entity after closure, shared Reverend Kathy Chesney, chair of the conference board of trustees. There is currently approximately a $9 million debt load on the Embrace properties. Quote, the trustees, as well as the mediation team, believe that servicing that debt for any length of time is not the best use of funds for the conference, says Chesney. So in a lot of ways, just follow the money and you can make sense out of complicated things. In reality, Dakotas Conference is not one of the bigger or more robust conferences. They are not very. The only time I think I've heard about them before is when they published that Q&A that was not at all sympathetic to the institution and was kind of wink, wink, telling churches to get out. Now, they're just not in a position to manage this debt coming from this church building, so they were much more amenable than they would have been had the financial incentives not been in place. So there are more details. I've got a link to that article in the show notes that you can find if you want to read the rest of the details there. Very well written. Whoever that author was, very decent. But in the meantime, it's an injustice. It's an unequal application of the law in United Methodist jurisprudence. While Embrace, a big, rich church, is able to get out, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller local United Methodist churches that are not able to get out because they aren't able to muster the influence and have these negotiations and provide the financial incentives in order for conference structures to take them seriously. So my hope is that they continue to agitate and to highlight, okay, how come over in the Dakotas, Embrace can do it and we can't? Is it just because we're small and poor? Is it because you have more power over us? It's worth continually asking these questions and agitating so that you and your church can get where you need to go. I want to pray. Father, I lift up the leadership of these small churches to you. These churches that are constrained in the United Methodist Church, they were told that after the general conference they would have a chance to get to where they need to go, and now the door has been shut. Father, continue to grant them clarity about what they can and cannot, should and should not do. Lord, if it becomes clear to them that they can no longer be in the UMC and they just need to walk away from their buildings, then give them the strength and integrity to do that. But if there are ways for them to stay and agitate and be faithful and pry open the door that is closing in so many other congregations, then Lord, give them the strength and power and boldness to have that witness. Help them not to be afraid. Give them clarity about the steps forward, such that they can maintain their righteousness and such that you are glorified. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.